public comment? No public comment. Tonight, we've asked Dr. Corey to come in to start the process on searching for a new superintendent for the High School District. So this will be a kickoff, and we'll move forward here with the process. Right, Dr. Corey?
Great, thank you, and thanks for inviting me in again. I've updated the timeline, which I gave to each of the board members. I first met with you earlier in July. We did a kind of an overview, and really the next steps are somewhat, kind of rapid in terms of timeline. The next step is to finalize the content of the vacancy announcement that we would use to get the word out in terms of the vacancy. I can work on that and send copies to the board and just kind of get an idea of, these are, whatever I send to, and I'll send it to the board president or the district clerk, and they can distribute it, and then those are drafts, and so if the board wants to make edits on them, just let me know. And also what I have with me tonight is a draft of an online survey. I'm assuming that the board would like to do a community survey, and so I'll give that. This is also a draft. Again, people can mark it up, can email me with changes. What I'd like to do, since school is opening, next week, I'd like to get the online survey open sometime in the first full week of school. So I think I put down September 11th as the opening of it. We would post it on your website with the links and leave it open. I've suggested for 2 full weeks we would do an announcement. Usually backpack letters work to get the community involved. Our community relations people can get the word out using social media.
Our principals or anybody can make maybe if we could make a statement, because they'll be seeing various parent groups throughout.
Opening day, we probably get the whole staff.
Right. So once the board reviews the draft of the outline, certainly again, make edits. If there are questions that I haven't asked that you would like to get some information about, certainly just send them to me. I'll put the survey together. It'll be probably on SurveyMonkey. It'll have a link to that. We leave it open. I've suggested 2 weeks. You can do it 3 weeks if you'd like. That's not a problem. I can pull results from this from the survey on an ongoing basis. So at the end of 2 weeks, I could send you what it looks like. Usually, you get a fairly big return quickly, and then it drops off. Okay. But I tend to leave it open even longer. But we usually announce a closing date because that forces people to kind of get that information out. Now, again, I suggested the last time that we met that you may want me to have meetings, focus meetings with constituent groups. Could be PTA leadership, it could be teacher leadership, and you'll identify, and I could work with district staff to tell me who are the constituent groups that you would want me to meet with. I would just get space here and come out in the evening. Or during the school day or after the school day, depending on which group it is, and literally just talk to them about, kind of reviewing what's in the survey, but face to face. Usually people share a bit more. All of that information, whether it's in the survey, the constituent groups, I would be reporting back to the board what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, and so on. So the meeting and survey report would be delivered to the board towards the end of the month of September. The board will talk to me about any specific qualifications. Do you want the person to be a resident of the district, a resident of the county? If those are important things for you, you just have to let me know so we build that into any announcements that we have. We would do a vacancy announcement towards the end of the month, but we can do that sooner. I can always change the vacancy announcement. So like if we haven't decided on the residency issue, or salary ranges, or what you want to have in the ad and not have in the ad, I can present a variety of samples, but we can always adjust them based on return that we're getting, and make additions to those announcements. Towards the end of the month, I would want to get print ads out to a variety of newspapers, We do social media prints, we contact New York State School Boards Association, New York Council, State Council of School Superintendents. I think the Council of State Superintendents has their fall meeting at the end of September, if I'm not mistaken. I will take what they call a search consultants table at that, and I will have information. Usually I spend an afternoon at that, so that people who are superintendents, who are looking or maybe looking for jobs, will come and, express an interest. So I'm gonna probably post some ads earlier so that it gets that information out to those particular groups on school board's website, as well as on the Council of School Superintendents. The online, people tend to search online these days. They tend not to necessarily wait for print ads.
That would be my question, Dr. The last meeting I had mentioned to the board, and gave them some information from our previous search when we landed Deborah. And I gave them some information, quite like you just discussed, as far as, salary range,
Yes.
and if you want to be a resident of the community or such. But the last time, for our search, we sent out a brochure,
Exactly like that.
like that, kind of.
That's what we put together.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're gonna do something similar to
Yes,
that?
absolutely. When people inquire, we send them applications, we send them brochures, but we also direct them to websites and things like that.
9 years ago,
Yes.
technology has improved, so that might not be the,
Yeah, we on an inquiry, and usually we ask, people to, whether it's an email inquiry or a letter inquiry, we will send them a whole battery of information. Yeah. And that brochure is very similar to what we produce. We'll just update all the information and so on. The application period, I was looking at part of the month of October. But in my way of thinking, the application is always open, even though you technically have a closing date. If you get a good candidate or a great candidate who shows up 2 days after the closing date, you don't want to turn them away. So I usually announce that, desired closing date, such and such a time, applications accepted until position is filled, that kind of thing. So that forces people to apply in a timely manner, but it doesn't set an absolute drop-dead deadline. The application screening, reference checking, preliminary interviews, I would do on an ongoing basis as we receive those applications. The applications would be directed to me in my offices. I would receive them. I'll provide, the board will ultimately get all the applications, everything, but I will do reference checks, screening interviews, phone interviews, those kinds of things, depending on where the people are located. If they're, a distance from here, probably phone or video interviews with them. If they're closer, in-person interviews. And I would do that on an ongoing basis. List of initial candidates would be submitted to the board early in November. And that would be everybody, okay? Different boards have worked with me differently. Some boards say, could you rank order in your impression the candidates? I could do that. I could just give you everybody with my notes from screening interviews and things like that. And then the initial interviews I have conducted by the board during the week of November 13th. And depending on how many there are, okay, these are usually just initial first contact interviews. Usually you might have 10, 12 candidates, and so they might be half hour, 45 minutes, and so you want to kind of block out time that week where you do executive session interviews. And you get a first impression, face-to-face, with the folks. Then, again, we haven't finalized. There's two ways you can go. You can say, let's assume we had 10 candidates, you interviewed all 10, and now you want to bring a group of candidates back for a second round interview. Depending on, some boards like to go second round interview with the board, some would like to go with their constituent groups. When I just did the Ontiora search, they went back to community groups. They brought 6 candidates back to constituent groups. I attend, if it's a constituent group, I attend all of those interviews. To do a couple of things. Move the interview along, kind kind of set the ground rules for the interviews. I train the people from the various constituent groups, what you can ask, what you can't ask. And so even though I train them, they may trip into an area that they can't ask, I can stop that, since I'm right there. Then I collect responses from them. Each board's a little different. The area that I've found to be most helpful is you don't want the constituent groups to come to consensus on this is the candidate. You just want their impressions. What did you like about the candidate? What did you not like about the candidate? What did you see as the candidate's strengths? What do you see as the fit? The way I usually do that, if there's 20 people in the constituent groups, I'll just give, candidate one comes in, does an hour interview. I give out a feedback form. They fill out the feedback form. There's no discussion. They're not talking with each other. We collect all those feedback forms, and then we move on to the next candidate. So usually it takes 3.5 hours. So if we know that that's what we want to do, you identify the people who you think, or the groups that you want, so that I can get them to reserve time that week, because you want the same people. If it's going to be multiple days, you want to make sure the same people are there, so you're getting the same impression across. I collect all those feedback forms, duplicate them. You can do it electronically, you can do it by paper, and send it out to the entire board. So you get to read the feedback of every single person who responds to every single candidate. Then I usually bring the board back together, and you decide, you had first impression screening interviews, you have feedback from community groups and constituent groups, and now you do another round of interviews with the board, much more deeper dive, and you've narrowed the field. Perhaps the initial group was 10, perhaps you bring 5 or 6 back to the constituent groups, now you take 6 and maybe you're getting it down to 3. And then you take deeper dive interviews with those 3 folks. It's confidential at the first level. I tell the candidates, the moment we go to constituent groups, even though we ask people to be confidential, there's no promise of confidentiality. That's just the way of the world. And then, I can assure them at the board level, it's always going to be confidential, but beyond that, once we get to constituent groups, it's not confidential anymore. Then if you get down to 1 or 2 candidates, if you luckily or ideally you'd be down to 1 candidate, then usually the board, oftentimes, and boards debate this a lot, do we go out and do a site visit to where the person is presently working, talk to people? If you say yes, then I work with that candidate to set that up, schedule it. We do the site visit, and if you are happy with everything at that point, then you get the nice job of selecting the final candidate, and then you start contract negotiations and transition plans and all of that stuff. I put down, we can get it all done by February 1st. If you need it done sooner, we can shorten some of these timelines. If it's a sitting superintendent or a sitting school administrator, they have notice requirements. But that's the way of the world, and so if it's usually a 30 or 60-day notice requirement. Contracts differ, and if it's 60 days, then you say if we want somebody in place on February 1st, we have to back up a board appointment date 30 or 60 days.
Dr. Corey, with the constituent groups,
Yeah.
what would you say would be ideal as far as how many and the size of the groups? Because then you're gonna take up a lot of time with.
Sure.
If we're gonna narrow it down to say 10 candidates, and you wanna interview with the constituent groups.
Well, sometimes, and what I've done is, working with those groups, so for instance, let's say you have teacher leadership, pretty typical to include teacher leadership. So they might want to say, we want to bring 3 officers of our teachers union. They may ask 1 or 2 questions. It doesn't mean everybody who's at the table has to ask a question. And so that's the way you can kind of collapse it. And so PTAs, teacher groups, administrative,
And community.
community members, yes, absolutely, yeah.
So does 4 sound like a logical number
And
for those groups, or you don't wanna go that route? That's
I think you gotta gauge the response, and then, you
go from there.
yeah, you put your stakeholder groups, and
Yeah.
you want them all to be represented, but is it 1 or two representing each of those, you kind of have to gauge the
The
feedback.
survey will help to identify.
That's exactly right. We can add a question, because the community member piece may be harder for you to identify. You may know people that you want to invite, but you don't want to select as a, and you want to invite people to participate and then select. So we can add a question, we're planning constituent interviews the week of, would you be interested in participating?
Yeah, please check here if
That's
you're
right.
interested in participating.
That's exactly right. And leave your,
With,
you know,
guarantees and contact them.
although we did get, we started that way in Ontiora, and then people talked about confidentiality of their responses, and so we then changed it to, if you're interested in participating in a constituent interview, please send us your email or contact information via email, so that it was separate from the actual submission.
So your open-ended questions on the survey. will
Yeah.
Naturally lead into people.
Yeah. Yeah, the one that was really helpful for other boards is where I asked if, on the survey, if you had a question to ask of a potential candidate, what would you ask? Okay, and we collected, 50 different questions, and then the board selected either suggested questions for constituent groups, although the boards did not tell the constituents what questions to ask, but sometimes they needed a little help. So we said, here were some suggested questions that came up from the community of people who responded to the survey. And then some of the board members actually took some of the questions and asked it at final round interviews, because they were good questions.
Aside from the survey, I think I'm expecting some interaction with the staff of the building, so something, and then an opportunity for parents. And those sessions would be really for them to be able to verbalize the characteristics
Sure.
that they want, so.
I could do that. I mean, I've done it with, invitations. The search consultant's gonna be at the building. I could go to a faculty meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we could announce it like this, for the secondary level, it's gonna be at this time
Yeah.
frame. Elementary, an hour later, kind of work that out. Maybe the parent
We did in.
outreach could be that same evening. It's just an opportunity for them to
Absolutely.
come in and say, this is what's important to me.
I
in my
sat
next
in the
school
Ontiora
year."
High School cafeteria one evening from 7 to 9:30, and people just came, it
Right.
was advertised that I was there. Sometimes there was 5 people with me, sometimes there was 1 person with me. And I just said, so tell me what you're looking for in a superintendent, what are the characteristics you're looking for? And I was recording, I said I would always ask permission to record so that I could listen to them, and then I transcribed my notes, and that became part of the report.
I think I'd like to be able to say we made that available.
Yes.
Would you recommend us being present at
I'm
some of
gonna
those?
just ask board representatives to attend with you.
You can, but that's total, it works fine either, it's whatever you feel the comfort level. It might not be a good thing with staff members, with community members.
You're right.
Let them handle it. We have enough, we're in his ear all the time now about this, right? It's gonna be a daily discussion
Yeah.
for us, and communications and those kinds
Yeah.
of things. I think you wanna afford those opportunities and respect that.
Yeah, I'm an independent person, I'm just listening, I'm taking notes, transcribing them and bringing them back to the board.
Might
You'll,
even-
you'll get everything.
We might even be able to weave in an exercise for our student government at the high school and allow some
We
of
did
our
include students, senior high school students.
characteristics and things like
On the constituent committee in Ontario, we had 3 students, 3 high school students.
What's your feeling with the timeline? Do you feel it's okay? Do you wanna, of course, collapse it a little bit? What's your feeling? I think you're gonna find us, from my experience in the previous 2 that I sat through, is that the end result is time consuming.
Yes.
You're gonna decide to interview, let's say, 6, 8, 10 candidates, and you set up those certain dates, and then something happens, you gotta keep moving, we don't get all the members present that evening, and you gotta keep shuffling those dates around. It becomes very time consuming, and you're looking at that period of time when it's the holiday.
That's right.
And it makes it a little bit more difficult, so, think about that.
Well, we talked about, kind of getting into January and winding down for some kind of appointment, so.
Yeah.
The schedule speaks to that. I would just ask for any of our major events, that when you're building the calendar, you build in
I have
an
to look,
alternate ahead of time.
Absolutely.
So everybody
Yeah, we have
knows,
winter
if there's a
concerts.
snow day,
Yeah.
was.
And when I first put this together, you know, because I wanted to coincide with your board meetings, so I could come, I didn't have the board meeting calendar, I don't know, and I
Right,
can look on the website and see when the concerts are, when the plays
Right.
are, and all of that stuff, and work around that. Yeah, you know, it got to the point in the other searches where when you get all this information, so you have your initial interviews, you have all the community members, the survey results, you have the feedback from the constituent interviews. It was so overwhelming for my last, in my last search, that we came in on a Saturday and
Mhm.
literally worked from 8 o'clock in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon, going through everything. Every board member had a different view of sometimes looking at the same information, and, because you needed, and my job was, when we leave here, we have to have 3, okay?
Right.
You know, and so we stayed till, you know, pretty late in the afternoon on a Saturday, and everybody was fine, and we moved it forward from there. But it's a lot of information, to like digest and look at it, and everybody has, and I can feed it to you on an ongoing basis. As I get it, I can get it to you, but then when it's all together, it's, you know, it's not something you could do in an executive session after, on a.
No, right, we'll have to commit to that time
Yeah.
to review all the artifacts.
That's exactly right,
Narrow down, and
yeah.
I think beyond that discussion, you know, any committees that are involved in the process make recommendations, but the decision will ultimately be made here, and I think that
That's
needs to be very clear
Yeah.
upfront. These are advisory committees in
Yes.
an advisory capacity, and certainly are all part of the discussion, but that the decisions will be made.
Yeah, that's why I structure the group interviews that way, in that there's no, that's why I like to be there, because I can make sure that there's no cross discussions, trying to reach consensus. The board simply wants to know your feelings, your reaction to each candidate, write it down, everything that is gonna go to them, because it's advisory, and make that very clear.
So when the consensus comes down to 2 or 3 candidates, is the dialogue then, and I'm just trying to get on the same page, the dialogue then would be, you know, there's consensus here, so you need to be prepared that any one of these 3 candidates could be.
Yeah, and actually,
school leader.
the group will never come to consensus, because they're not, they might come to consensus out in the parking lot, okay, with the 5 people who they know or are most familiar with, but the fact is, as a group of the whole, let's say there's 20 people on that committee, 15 people at the committee, they're not saying we all like candidate 1, 2, or 3, and in my way of thinking, when the board finally narrows it down to 2 or 3, it might not be their 2 or 3, but they might say, well, maybe the other people thought differently. And I keep emphasizing that after each interview.
Fair enough,
Yeah.
gotcha, all
Yeah.
right, great, yep.
The timeline is very precise. Again, the only glitch we'd run is if we do have a 60-day shift, that would push us into past February
Yeah,
on this calendar.
and I can accelerate it, like I said, it just shortens some of the time periods.
I think we need to get through September, and then, you know, we're constantly gonna be checking the oil on that
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the timeline, the end of September is when we're gonna get the results of the survey.
Yes.
And do you want to set up some standalone meetings for our conversation with Dr. Corey when we get results, or when we have situations where it requires more time, so we're not, you know, taxing the general meetings?
I think the more we can plan for it, I think the better.
Yes.
So all the,
Right, so like I said, you know, earlier on, this process now for the next 4 or 5 months gonna entail, you know, additional meetings, and hopefully we can get everybody together at those meetings so individuals don't lose out on the information.
I
But
can
we'll
say-
share everything.
I can send you dates that I'm not available over the
That
next
would work.
5 months.
Sure.
Because believe it or not, I do have a calendar that is somewhat
course.
chopped. So I'll send you dates that I'm not available, and then just work around that. Any other days, nights, weekends.
Yeah, are Saturdays an
We
option for them?
spoke
or-
about, you know, Saturday morning, we've always said we, you know.
Saturdays are an
It
option.
just seems like that.
It's easy, that's actually the easier sometimes.
Anybody have any other questions or concerns? This will be, for me, this will be a different process. I mean, I sat through 2 searches, and I think this one's a little different, and I'm open to it. I think it's gonna be, productive to get, the constituent groups to give us some feedback and move forward. Like I said earlier, the last 2, we as a board pretty much took control of the whole search, and I think, the stakeholders, like you said, might need to have some weigh-in on the decisions or the direction they'd like the board to move in.
My understanding is some people have already called and inquired, so,
Yes.
that's, we have to do what we
Yeah.
say.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Do you think a general meeting where community members can come in and just kind of, at a board meeting, or just a standalone meeting without us, and you bring all the community members, whoever want to come in?
Yeah, I
to
think,
give you that?
I mean, I can work with just picking out a date. It could be mid-September, it could be early September,
Yeah.
once, you all probably have back-to-school nights and things like that, so I have to kind of
Right,
navigate
Yeah,
that
first
calendar
week and a
piece,
half.
but just say, our search consultant's gonna be in the high school cafeteria from 6:30 to 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Feel free to drop in. And I
Well,
don't
some of them
literally,
might not, know,
Yeah.
see the, well, don't look at our website to,
Yes.
they
Yeah,
have
the
a
social
survey
media's
on.
out
and-
there.
social media,
Yeah.
website,
And do we remind on every board meeting if we remind
A
district?
robocall.
yes, that works. Check the website, there's a link to
Yeah.
the community survey, Usually you create on your website, superintendent search kind of section.
Icon, yeah.
And that it's there during the duration, and so that there's always the latest news on what's going on and what's the timeline. If we
I
lock
like
in,
that idea.
if we lock the timeline in, you just post the timeline. But I would always put, the tentative,
Subject to.
because the reality
That's
is,
the
you may
reality.
not come to closure on something, and it now may take a little bit longer.
Okay, anything else? Appreciate coming in.
Sounds great.
We'll stay in touch to
Yeah, and
move.
review the survey.
Yes,
Okay, and get that back, any changes, feed them to Al, and he can send them to
I'll
me.
send them off to you.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then,
let's try to set a deadline for each other on that and make it timely so we can,
Okay.
it all starts from that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can't be lagging.
Yeah, we gotta-
This is a 48-hour kind of turnaround time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you lost that opportunity.
We'll do that under our old business on our agenda.
sounds good. Very good, thank you so much.
Good to see you, Dr. Corey,
Okay,
thank you.
Good seeing you again. Okay, have a great opening of school.
You too.
Oh, thank you.
Take care.
Very nice.
Okay. All right, we have a public hearing. Public hearing is gonna take place to review the proposed code of conduct policy first reading for the 2016-17 school year. The first reading, does anyone have?
I should go 2000.
Oh,
Oh, yes, that's
Oh,
correct.
you read it right.
Oh, it's just.
Yeah.
Oh, it's down below,
Yeah.
right, so.
Yeah.
Change to one.
That should be 17, 18.
Yeah.
If there's anyone from the public. right?
Yeah. But then we'll go to a second reading before we adopt. So I'll open it up if anyone has any concerns on our, questions on our code of conduct policy.
Heather, did you have some input on that, and were those corrected in this particular copy? I thought at some point, okay, was there any change to any of the infractions?
That was the,
I thought there was a discussion on that.
I don't believe there was a change to specific infractions. We did add language to clarify for bus infractions, just that instead of buses just being, anything that happened on the bus before was just a bus infraction. Now we added the bus to things like, inappropriate behavior, I can't remember exactly
I
what the things were.
understand, but to other
Yeah.
information.
Yes, because we kept seeing bus incident, you have no idea, it could have been standing up on the bus, it could have been, something serious, an altercation, so. That was the biggest change, everything else was kind of
Right, I think
little
that's usually
languagey things.
Right. aligning type of
Oh.
items.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I'm good.
Online, we're getting an overlap
It's
of
an overlap, I
graphics
don't know
on
why.
the text.
I don't know if it's showing that on the iPad or is that on the computer.
Do you
If
get that on
you-
the computer as well?
Sometimes it's in how you read it or how you view it. I don't know, I think I sent a PDF,
It is through a PDF, I
Yeah.
know where they clarify.
so it's not,
I'll check it on a home computer, see
Yeah,
if
see
try
if you get
there,
something.
and if not, I can always
Tom has a
print it
computer.
for you and I can get your copy too, if you'd rather see it.
no, better not to waste the paper and money.
I'd rather not, but if you need to.
Can you send a red line for any changes or no?
I thought that's what I did, but I'll double check it, sometimes
Okay.
it's hard to get the PDF and the changes and, but yes, I'll do that.
Thank you. Send a red line version to show what changes.
Okay, so we'll go to our second reading to adopt the policy. Under personnel, I'd like to take personnel as a block, except for A, we'll do that as a standalone. So I'll read A, and then if you have no objection, we'll take personnel as a block from B to E. And then we have, in our appointments, we have individuals here that will be recognized.
Did you say A to E?
A as standalone and B to E as a block,
So B through E.
I'm good.
okay? Settlement agreement and general release. Be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby approves the terms of a separation agreement and general release between the Highland Central School District and employee number 1363 dated August 21st, 2017, as presented to the board at this meeting, a copy of which agreement shall be incorporated by reference within the minutes of this meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Heather, second by Tom. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. And as a block, we're taking B through E. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Mike, second by Ed. Discussion?
Yeah, present teacher. Must be some change there.
Yes, an experienced person.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm just,
Occasionally, we have someone who's the top candidate that is seeking to move from one district to another. Doesn't happen very often. This year we've had two.
no,
that's why.
where I'm going.
Yeah. But that's not our typical, we don't typically get candidates that are that experienced. But in this particular instance, we were fortunate enough to have a seasoned, experienced person who's wants a change from an elementary program to a high school program, and also a highly experienced coach.
That's great.
Okay.
I just wanted to know, because I see it is with regret, the resignation of Stacy Moharo and Jennifer Martin, so thank you for their service.
Deborah, on the new hires, both of those are 3-year probationary period?
Yes, I'm sorry, the physical education is a 3-year because he has had prior tenure,
So it's 3.
tenure prior in his previous school
And the
district.
other ones are so good.
Yes, that's a 6.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. And would you like to introduce?
Yes, I would. It's my pleasure to introduce to the board this evening Harriet Meyer. Harriet is joining us for the school year as the lead replacement for Stephanie Santagata-Wells, and we're very excited to have Harriet join us. She did an outstanding job during interview, has a lot of experience in working with students and has some unique connections, I think, to bring to us as well. Harriet's had experience in dance as well versed in the English language arts curriculum. And she's also very interested in sustainable farming, which I think will fit in nicely with some of our outdoor classroom work that we have. And I don't know if anyone expressed to you during the interview process, Harriet, but we do have a school garden that we harvest. So I think there's an opportunity for some cross-curricular work to be done as well. So welcome, and we look forward to a successful year with you and our students here at the high school.
Congratulations. Okay, Board of Education, new business, a contract for our athletic trainer services. Be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon recommendation of the superintendent of schools, approves the contract between Highland Central School District and Keith Duarte for training services for modified junior varsity and varsity home football games at a rate of $150 per game, and as presented to the board at this meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Heather, second by Mike. Discussion?
Is this the same individual from last year?
Yes,
Same individual or same fee?
Same.
I think it's both.
Same individual, I think it has same fee, I
Same
don't
fee?
remember
Yes.
that.
Yes.
In fact, do we do anything for the other,
No.
just football?
Keith is here once a week, on his own through his business. Checks on kids on Tuesdays, and then either himself or somebody else will cover the football games.
But he's here, you're saying, once a week for the
On
entire school
Tuesdays
year,
after
or
school.
just the football season?
No, throughout the whole school year.
The whole school year,
Yeah.
okay,
He'll follow up on injuries and things like that.
okay. Good. Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? So carried. Under old business, superintendent's search, we had Dr. Corey in earlier to go over, and we just need to set a date. If anybody had any questions, let me know, but we need to set a date when you have, if you have any comments to the online survey that will go out.
Well, I was gonna say, because I'm looking, we all have a survey in front of us. Could we just take 5 minutes here so each board member could read through the survey and see if we could turn that feedback around? Because if we have no recommendations, we don't need to take any more time.
I can throw one at you right now. As far as, under the, having went through it, one skill that I think Deborah had that really proved useful to us was her ability to reach out and raise funds through the congressman and local support agencies. And I think if we could somehow incorporate one of those experiences in there. I didn't see anything really doing that.
Can I just want to read through.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Just on the, maybe see them.
And well, you already go through, you want to put word together that you want to go through that number 14? It could be, short and sweet. Number 10, skills, skilled in working within the political process. I mean, with that,
I think it's more of a management
yeah,
thing, doesn't
all
it?
right.
That's sort of extension.
dodge your bullet.
These are just suggestions. Give us some.
And then you get the open-ended at the end, and put everything. You need more time, Heather, or any other? I was looking for one specifically for capital project, but it is in
It's in
there.
there,
I saw it.
community involvement in there, pretty much
It's a good
I
document.
have a few just minor typo things.
minor.
Yeah.
In a moment.
Was there any extra copies that went down that way?
Yeah, I'm gonna, send one to Sue. And
Oh,
there's
okay.
this one extra, there's one extra, yeah, and then,
You got one for sure?
yes,
Okay.
so if you pass that one
Send it
down.
back and I can write on that one.
Pass, okay.
They're my changes and the extra.
Oh, okay.
The orange edits. Have fun with Dr. Corey. Hey, Doc, oh, it looks good, but
Well, I wonder too, if, I don't know what the edits are, but I wonder if they printed it off of whatever the survey thing is, so it might come out formatted strange back too.
Are you gonna roll back, you wanna keep one? Okay.
all right, thank you. If we can knock those off quicker,
I
right?
agree with that.
Stop taking it.
Pretty nice picture.
Why would I wait 2 days and say, oh, it's a good thing? Those little tasks, we'll get out of the way. I had another old business item if you're ready, I just want to review something.
Okay, everybody have an opportunity to read through.
Send them up there on page 2.
Any additions, comments you want to put to it?
I guess the two I would add, well, one or two, depending how you think we would want to phrase it. One would be skilled in interactions with business and political communities. I know I think it's just a distinct change from, it mentions skilled in communications, but I think interactions with the business and political communities. And then whether it's another item or just an offshoot of that, skilled in the exploration and acquisition of alternative funds.
Can you write that fast?
Yeah, right.
Still, what would be 15?
15 would be skilled in the exploration and acquisition of alternative funds.
It's no alternative funding.
And securing alternative funding, acquisition and, acquisition and securing. Say it once more. Skills and acquisition,
I put exploration and acquisition, if they can secure it, no problem.
okay. Anything else? I think we're good, so I'll get that back to him and we can have it ready. Okay, we'll open the meeting up to
I
public.
did have, I'm sorry, I did have one more old business.
Sure.
There was a parent here with their child, and they just talked to me about a concern, and it has to do with our swim team. We need like a coach for our swim team, and I just wanted to know what the status was of that.
Frank's meeting with a candidate tomorrow, and then we have a parent of one of the swim team members who's also very close to
Yep.
qualified. Coach, my understanding is the one candidate can't cover all of their needs, so Frank's,
Yeah, we're, tomorrow, I mean, we've been advertising since the other person we had resigned,
Okay.
and no one's come forward, so, I mean, we advertise not just here, but through Orange County BOCES, and, right now, our swim team's practicing with Marlboro,
Right.
and Marlboro's coach, and, hopefully we resolved by tomorrow. Our first meet is next week.
So the people would be in place, they would be retroactively
Okay,
appointed.
and that's something we might see then next Tuesday.
Well, I don't know, if are we meeting next Tuesday? We had
That's
talked
the
about-
last, that's the last discussion, yeah.
Yeah.
Only because there might not be much on the agenda to meet next Tuesday.
Right.
We're still trying to wrap up some of
Oh, I
our
see.
appointments.
This would be retroactive
It would be
at
retroactive.
our next
to-
regularly scheduled
Yeah,
meeting.
we'll,
back.
we'll
Oh,
let
fair
them
enough.
go ahead and start coaching.
Okay,
We'll give them a letter, we'll give them some kind of
understood, right.
confirmation
Okay,
that they'll be appointed. And, because I think there are 8 girls.
Yes, there's
There are
7 or 8 girls.
7 or 8 girls. The cutoff for shadowing is 6.
yeah, right, and we have a team.
We have a team, and, you know, I did meet with a parent about this as well yesterday, and just restated the, you know, the adamant position that we took as a district and going, and myself going to, and Frank, to Section 9 meetings and not being heard, and maybe the parents should reach out to, Section 9 with their concerns about how this you know, next year maybe we shadow, following year, maybe we
Yeah,
have
it's
to have a
close to the
coach.
margin, we're not sure.
And I think our difficulty in trying to find someone to coach the swim team demonstrates the fact that their policy could have potentially harmed these girls if we didn't find anybody.
Right.
And I know Frank's been looking, so.
Has Marlboro offered any alternatives? Like, in other words, if we were in the position to fund a coach, is there anyone?
Right now, our schedule's different than Marlboro. That's the difference.
Right,
Our schedule, let's say, we could be at Marlboro as a home meet, Marlboro could be at New Paltz. So that one coach couldn't cover both teams.
because it's the same evening?
Correct. So Highland will still practice with Marlboro during their window. We'll have our coaches, that's what we did with the boys. We did that in the winter with the boys. We had our own coach, we practiced together with Marlboro, and then when we had our swim meets, we went our separate ways.
Okay, and that's, right, okay. Let's see how it goes, thank you.
All right, real quick, JV, boys soccer, have a coach.
Hoping to have that to be resolved tomorrow also.
Okay, anything for the good and welfare of the district?
This first meeting in September, I did reach out to our construction manager, to our architect, I know you got an overview of where we are tonight, but actually talking about where we are in terms specifically of the project budget and any, I know we had a couple of alternatives that we had not yet awarded, the lockers in the hall lockers and the lighting in the auditorium, and of course, we still have, no pun intended, the roofs hanging over our heads. So, you know, we do need to have an idea of where we are today with the project budget. I know that, the CM is not available on the 5th, they already have a commitment for a meeting on the 5th, but they are available on the 19th. I don't know if that's when you wanna have your first meeting, but I just wanna make sure that I let you know that he's available for that meeting, for that update. So I don't wanna let that fall off of our schedule.
And I'm not available on Tuesday the 12th. But doesn't necessarily mean that we can't still have a meeting on the 12th. Yeah, and back to the, I think it's important, I mentioned that to Deborah, if you read through the executive summary that our construction managers put together, you'll notice that allowances are stated as still available, but my question is 10% or 100% of that allowance, so we know what we have for funding, to kind of put the ball in motion for picking up any of the additional alternates that are still hanging out there.
Yeah, I think the 19th is the earliest that you could do that, only because there's so much work going into getting these buildings ready to maintain. And there's like a lag time of a week when all those costs still come in, and, well, you know, we need to get somebody back out here.
So if we have appointments to be made on the 12th, I won't be here either, but that doesn't mean Sarah couldn't be present with the vice president to get appointments made, because we will have we have additional
Yeah.
staff.
So you need the meeting on the 12th.
Or if you want to have it on a different day of the week.
A different day, I can make any other day of that week.
Bump it up to the 11th then, on Monday the 11th?
Let's leave it as the 12th. You gotta start working within the Tuesdays that are assigned. And the president gets a well-deserved evening off.
So then, is
So
that,
to speak.
I don't know about an evening off.
So to speak.
Make sure you get a dinner out of it, Al, wherever you're at.
so then
I'll
there'll
have
be a
your tuna
meeting
sandwich here for you.
You'll have it.
12th or the 19th then?
And I'll hold it
I like it on ride.
The bite,
I think the 12th and the 19th.
Well,
We'll be back to back then, is that?
Yeah.
what can they do right, maybe we need that, or maybe we don't.
19th
We'll
is the
need it.
normally scheduled date,
We'll
right,
need it.
for a meeting?
We'll
First
need
and
it.
third, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
We'll need it.
yes, we should
Okay, so
have a budget update.
September 12th.
Okay, thank you. I will let them know
Right.
to confirm, don't schedule anything else but Highland on the 12th, or the 19th.
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 Okay. And with Dr. Corey, he's looking to have the report for the survey delivered back to the board on the 27th, which would be
Thursday.
Yeah.
No.
I have that.
Yes, it is.
By the 27th,
Yes, according to his timeline.
and he said he wanted to open it for a good solid 2
No, I'm
weeks,
sorry,
which means
I'm
the
sorry.
13th.
27th is a Wednesday.
By the 27th, delivered. Now, I don't know if he wants to meet with us directly.
Well, I think on the 4th, he has a meeting with the board to discuss qualifications.
Right.
I think he's just giving us the information on the 27th and giving us a few days to absorb it.
All right, I'll check with him if he wants to meet with us on the 27th, or he's just gonna give us the information, and then we'll meet on the 4th, is the 4th day, board meeting, right?
October 4th?
I don't believe it is.
No.
That's a Wednesday.
Wednesday?
That's the first Wednesday, so the first Tuesday would be on the 3rd.
Yeah, he's got,
He might be
online survey
committed.
closes on 9/22.
4th is the Wednesday.
But that's this, which we're approving.
I think they have their board meetings the third Wednesday of every month
Okay.
in BOCES. I don't know if they have more than one, but definitely they meet on the 3rd.
All right, so, yeah, that's doable, because us
So it's,
giving him the survey with the minor changes we're recommending, and he can go
That can go on
ahead with
by
that,
next
so
week.
he'll meet that timeline. But I think I'd like to know, at the latest the 12th, since we're meeting, what evenings or when he's engaging staff and community regarding the characteristics discussion. So that means checking the calendar, let's make sure those buildings are clear, we're gonna need a space.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a secondary elementary to capture different
I'll
populations.
push him to get the dates that he is not available.
That's what he said, okay.
Would it work for him to come actually on our open house nights? I mean, you'd have people, I mean, I don't know.
The
what's
problem
schedule.
is that's gonna overshadow
Just
all
Yeah.
the other things.
I thought you'd get
So
people.
it's, I mean, I like the efficient thinking,
Yeah,
it's just gonna be
I
different.
think that actually maybe one of his dates, the 18th, is meet the parents, isn't it? One of the.
I don't know when.
Well, that's what I mean, that, it's a tight calendar and so.
Yes,
that's
he
what
had,
he talked about,
he had
so.
that beginning on the 18th and
All right, let's
ending
see
on
what
the
it turns around in
22nd.
48 hours, see if we get you some dates that he can't do.
Yeah.
And then let's
Yeah.
work
Yeah,
that
we'll
way.
work back from there. Okay, anything else? Open the meeting up to public comment.
Ready to rock,
Motion-
Mary Ann? Ready to go?
Just a strong
Motion to
silence.
go, to adjourn, go into executive session.
Motion.
Motion by Mike, second.
Lisa, if you'll turn off the camera, we're gonna take a quick break. I know there's food in the kitchen, but
And also
there
the-
are tax bills